No, it is alarming, but also there is hope. Because when these vestiges are there and we are constantly getting people to be aware that they exist, so you have to uproot them and hopefully bring in the positive elements that help us connect with the global world in a more effective way.
This is Not to Forgive, but to Understand, with your host, writer and scholar of genocide studies, Saba Karim. I am your co-host, Luis Gonzalez Aponte.
Not to forgive, but to understand.
Not to forgive, but to understand.
Jeanine Ntihirageza is an associate professor at Northeastern Illinois University, whose research spans various critical areas, including linguistics, language teaching, refugee studies, genocide, and human rights in Africa. She has notably served as chair of the Genocide and Human Rights Research Group at NEIU and is the founding director of the Genocide and Human Rights Research in Africa and the Diaspora Center. In this interview, we delve into Jeanine's work entitled Education and Epistemicide in Africa, towards an Ubuntu-based comprehensive model of education. Please enjoy our conversation.
Jeanine, we're very happy to have you here today. We've been looking forward to speaking with you about this important subject of epistemicide. And I think it's a very central topic in the context of genocide, as such, genocide studies. I mean, we know that by now there have been many neologisms that have been coined, including the word "cide." And some of them, of course, there's always a debate about their applicability. But I think in your paper that you wrote together with Aissatou Ibrahima, you made it very clear that there is a need to reconsider or to bring back this topic into the discourse. So my first question to you is that this chapter, that we're analyzing today, which is titled Education and Epistemicide in Africa, towards an Ubuntu-based comprehensive model of education. This introduces, of course, the concept of epistemicide in relation to African education. Can you elaborate on how you first encountered this concept and why it became central to your work?
Thank you so much for this great question, Saba. I would say, first of all, this topic is absolutely central. If we're going to talk about decolonization in Africa, if we want to talk about healing from trauma, we need to consider the nature of knowledge today, African knowledge, what we call now indigenous knowledge. And with that, so when did I first encounter this? All my life, from when I got into boarding school, looking back now, that, it was always a problem that we learned how to eat with a fork and knife. And if you ate with your hands, it was bad. We learned that any dress, if you dressed the traditional way, a wraparound and a shirt that's traditional, that was bad. You had to wear pants and skirts and shirts, and that's European. So all of a sudden, we are replacing what we knew was good with, and forgetting it. Not just like replacing it because it's bad. We're told it's bad. So you had to quickly forget it. And that was always a problem for me. But did I have space to express it? No. We were still under the vestiges of colonization, even if we were we had independence, but all the roots, the systemic elements that stayed with us. So epistemicide for me was that bad replacement of what we knew, to replace it with what's from outside, without combining, right? Ideally, when we adjust to new cultures, when we adjust to other elements that enrich our lives, we are allowed to bring both sets of elements together and choose what's best, or marry them together. But this time, in this case, it was a replacement because it was bad. And that aspect of bad was really what made us forget our own or denigrate our own knowledge, the indigenous knowledge. And I found out for most colonized people, that's how it was. So that killing or killing really, like you get rid of it. It doesn't exist. If it comes in, no, it's bad. You push it away. And that's really what happened. I mean, examples are numerous, food. If we ate traditional beans and potatoes and that wasn't civilized. You had to eat like a civilized person, fries and a lot. Anyway, so all my life I've lived with it, but questioning, but not having space to express this kind of frustration. But now I'm incredibly grateful that I can revisit really what happened to colonized people, starting with Burundi, my country, my native country. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jeanine. This is a very clear explanation of your project in the paper. I have also been exposed to, the developments within Africa because of where I come from as well. And mm-hmm. one of the questions, or one of the larger, I think, discussions, which I thought is important to introduce here, is, whether, this discussion about how we have, I just want to quote something from your work here, from your paper, where you talk about the result of this brainwashing and devaluation of indigenous epistemologies was European minds in African bodies. Now, mm-hmm. this concept has been discussed very widely in post-colonial studies. It has been discussed by, prominent writers and scholars such as Ngugi wa Thiong'o, yes. among many others.
Yes.
And my question is, we have made some progress. That's what I've noticed. And I want to yes. talk about that progress. Where are we at today after, shall we say that this sort of movement has been pretty much active since the last 20 to 30 years or so, where we've been trying to actively move away from these dominant forms of living, of life, that have been imposed on other cultures, including ours. So where are we at now? And what should we do? And I'm making a big assumption here.
Yes.
What should we do to make it better?
Beautiful, beautiful question. Thank you so much. Have we improved? Have we made positive steps forward? Yes. Do we have a long way to go? Yes, unfortunately. So we have really improved in the sense that now you have, with mind decolonization literature and with the leaders who are now being trained within this framework of mind decolonization, yes, we're seeing more policies that are into empowering, bringing to surface, giving voice to what was forgotten, what was denied. And so there are leaders who are really promoting this way of thinking and valuing, revalorizing our knowledge, our traditional ways of doing things, including Ubuntu, right? Bringing it to the surface. However, having said that, we still have a long way to go. When we look at our books, our curriculum, and when I say our, meaning those who are formerly oppressed countries, societies, you look into the textbooks, we're not there yet. We're still teaching the Eurocentric curriculum we inherited back when. And in fact, I think we include this in the paper. I feel like we're more European than Europeans themselves when it comes to what we do, what we practice, what we teach our young people. Not only because we're still using the language that we inherited from them. So obviously in linguistics, we say language and culture are intimately related, or language and thought, right? not necessarily one-on-one, like intimately, but there is a relationship between the language and the culture. So what you express in the language, it tends to be applied like hand in hand with the culture the language comes from. So American English teaches American concepts most of the time. So, but we have to make an effort to use that language only as a tool to express not indigenous knowledge, the knowledge of where we are, of the people we are teaching, right? So we haven't done that. So in many parts of Africa and in many parts of, and I speak for Burundi, the curriculum is not there yet. Until we get to that, until we say Ubuntu is a precious tool we can use, we can teach to our young people, we're not there yet. So we need to, what can we do? We need to rethink the curriculum. But by the way, that requires resources. The reason why we haven't changed after my decolonization literature and the experiences and people really bringing it to surface, we know it in our heads, but we don't have the resources. So many people don't have the resources to apply it, to make it, to practice it in the curriculum, in the practical application, when they do internships, when they run all kinds of activities that are related to this shift. It requires resources. And until we get that, but sometimes it's, it takes resources, but it doesn't mean necessarily money. So I don't want people to think about it as money. No, it's about much more. So, but I can get back to resources, but really, we're not there yet. We've made headways, we really have improved, but we're not there yet. As people have been oppressed, who have been colonized, we're not there yet.
Mm-hmm. So from what I gather that you're saying here is that we're at around that revalorization point in the model that you present, and I would like for you to go ahead and speak about the model that you outline within this paper that you propose, the model that has the 4 stages: the decolonization, revalorization, revitalization, and creation construction. And I'm hoping that you could go ahead and maybe expand on what each one of these propose and what they mean, and then which one presents the greatest challenge in practice right now.
So revitalization, rethinking, mind decolonization, all of these stages are kind of ahead together. Like they depend on each other in a way. You can't do one without the other and succeed. What I would say that's most important, of course, is awareness, right? In these stages, we have to create awareness especially for the young people. And then, so inside, outside awareness. When I say inside, I mean from those talking to each other among ourselves won't help us until the world knows about this. Because the colonization came from outside, and we need to send the message outside to talk about how, what the colonization, what it brought, what it did to these countries, right? So awareness inside and outside. Let me give you a quick example about most of us who came to live abroad. If I come here, I get more resources, I support my family. There are young people watching. They say, oh, I guess to have more resources, I need to go away, go abroad. So while I'm not, some of us, we're talking, this is one thing I really, when you mentioned Ngugi wa Thiong'o, he's talked about how we keep using tools from the master to try to resolve problems. of our home, in a home, the home problems, right? We cannot succeed that way. And I'm giving an example of how when we don't help our young people be aware of the issues, that we keep using the foreign elements to understand themselves and understand the world. So awareness, and that's why I say put it in the curriculum. That's the best. I mean, K through 12 is the best place to put general education that shows the values, the amazing values that they have, that have been presented by our ancestors, that were created. And so showing the values, the internal indigenous values is going to be key. So that's awareness, like what was stolen away and what was left that's still valuable. Okay? So that's the revalorization, like showing the value of our own, of the ancestors' knowledge. Revitalization, so showing that it works. So not just showing that it's been stolen, it's been killed, it's been replaced, but then what? It works. Showing it in different spaces, right? Whether it's in a business, whether it's in a law, whether it's in, right? Like, in Rwanda, they use the courts, the community-based courts to resolve, to try to settle cases of genocide, a horror like genocide. But they used the courts, traditional courts, to bring them back as an amazing, useful tool. You see? So that's like just one example, showing it works. That's the revitalization. Then bringing the culture. You asked the question about the most challenging one. I would say really it's still mind decriminalization. Now with the social media, our young people are still told that the best is in the West. So how do we fix that? We're competing with globalization. And globalization teaches them English. And with English, and by the way, in my other hat, besides being director of the Center for Genocide and Human Rights Research in African Diaspora, my other hat is training teachers to teach English. So, and one of the questions I ask every time is the role of English you're going to teach. It may be replacing the traditional languages, the native languages out there. Is that your goal? Is this our goal? Obviously, it shouldn't be, right? But there is the constant, like English carries so much weight, so many, cash, literally. The English language almost has cash with it. It has technology that adds so much. So it almost like to succeed in this global world, you have to learn English, right? So with that, how do I teach Ubuntu and show them, hey, Ubuntu is valuable, even if it's packaged in Kirundi originally, but in English, I need to show them that. That's why I say we work inside and outside to be able to reach, to succeed with this model of education. So in a nutshell, combining the traditional, the informal, let's call it informal education, non-formal education, formal education, all of it bringing it together, but continuously producing indigenous knowledge-related content. When I say content, it's even a science, even in math. Don't leave behind anything of the traditional knowledge. Bringing it back to making it relevant to today's world. That's really what I would say. We have to combine all of it. We cannot just say, we're going back to traditional education, indigenous knowledge. No, no, that won't work. We are in 2024. And so, and so we're going to have to choose what's best in the formal education that we receive, in what's best in the indigenous knowledge. Because after all, by the way, I need to make this clear, I don't want to romanticize everything that's in the indigenous knowledge, in the indigenous education. No, there are elements that were great and others that were not. So selecting what's best in all the forms of education will be the best way to approach this.
Thank you, Jeanine. I really appreciate the fact that we're having a conversation which is important about, moving away from binary thinking. When we speak about wanting to replace something existing with another, unfortunately, many of us engage in binary thinking. We're always thinking about excluding the other, but here we're talking about incorporating everything. And I think this is pretty much the direction that I think the better aspects or the better parts of scholarship are heading. And I really value it as an academic myself. My question now is, it's going to be just my own contention with this conversation and this discourse about, indigenous knowledge. My question is about the fact that, you mentioned this on page 287 of the chapter when you speak about, under the subheading, when you speak about cultural relevant indigenous research and scholarship in higher education. And in point 2, you talk about exactly what we just discussed, which is indigenous methodologies, right? You say one of the things we must do is we must encourage research, examples, senior essays, master's theses, dissertations, and other research that address national and local problems using indigenous methodologies. So I hear my problem at a very practical level, and this is, pardon my ignorance, and that's why I'm having this conversation with you right now, is we talk about all of this quite easily. There is this sort of, even when we speak about, feminist studies or post-humanist studies, we talk about moving away from the more Western methods of, doing research, even when we're writing a scholarly paper. But my next question is to say, well, yes, that's an attractive idea. Let's see what else we can do. But to get my hands on those other methodologies is what I'm struggling with. So my question at the very basic level, at the substantive level of trying to find out is, where is all of this? And what is happening with respect to developing these alternative methodologies? Because it's attractive.
Yes.
Where is it? That's the question.
Yes, there is the frustration that right now there isn't that one theories course or techniques course that shows you step 1, 2, 3. This is how you do it. We are all still working on building on the different pieces. But here is some of the examples of that approaches that have worked. Very simple, but that really helps students outside the let me call them just Western bound or Western perspective education, like those who are in that space. How do they engage non-Western kind of research methodologies? One, so let me ask you, Saba and Luis, maybe you have this experience. How many of your students have cited work but written by, I'm just going to stay with the continent, African scholars who are in Africa, not those of us who are outside?
That's a very good question.
You see? Yeah, and I'm not putting you on the spot like this, but it's just that we don't. Now, like, I literally this semester I said, no, I will not read a paper that doesn't have a citation of somebody that's not from the West, like has a funny sounding name that's from the global South. That's like a conviction for me. I go straight to the references, I say, yep. And then I read the paper, because we have to get our students to go explore how those people from the global South are thinking differently from the West, right? And the way they express themselves. Let me give you one quick example. If I'm going to tell you a story, Luis and Saba, in Burundian way, in many Bantu-speaking people, this is how we start. I want to tell you that Saba and Louise attended a presentation, attended a talk or an event, right? So I start, oh, do you remember Louis? You know, that person, you remember one time we met him over there, and I'm describing Louis. Then I said, and then Saba, remember Saba, that one person? And I'm describing Saba. And then I say, yeah. And then remember how they started talking about this topic. And guess what? They went to this conference together. The point I was trying to make was that you went to a conference. But I start beating around the bush and I go around and around and eventually. So I said this with my own children. They said, can you go straight to the point? What are you trying to say? So until I started learning about the way, so this one is called a circular argument, but in English, you're supposed to have your thesis statement in the introduction, period. If you don't do it that way, you lose them. They are gone. So within 5 minutes, you've lost your audience if you don't do it that way. But there are many other ways of expressing self, right? And Japanese do it differently, Koreans do it differently, Spanish speakers do it differently. So all like the way, where is the thesis statement, right? That's a different way. And that different way, by the way, expresses what the culture values. So in Burundi, for example, we value that you pay attention to, let's enjoy language. So that's why you have so many proverbs and so many sayings, and as they say, and as the snake takes longer, but it gets to the river, and we have all these formulas because we want you to enjoy language rather than boom, straight to the point. You see, so that's just like a way of engaging other ways of working, of interacting, of researching, right? And so when my mother is telling us stories around the fireplace, same idea. They don't tell you, this is what you're going to do. We're talking about, no, they let you work with them, like follow, right? Keep track. And at some point they start to say, so where do you think now the character is going to do? And you have to say, right, you start guessing. That's critical thinking. And so there are many things. I could give many examples of how there are many other methodologies, but they haven't been explored enough because we've been presented with one way of thinking, and that's what we cite. We cycle over and over again, and before we know it, we're going to lose so much. And by the way, AI is not doing that. It's hurting us so much, hurting those of us who come from the global south, because what's digital now, what's been digitized is mostly from the West. And so the gap between the global south and the West is going to widen unless we really are intentional in growing. And by the way, Saba, we've been collecting testimonies, genocide testimonies. That's one of the things I hope we achieve, to really translate, transcribe language and digitize it and put it out there so it's available in the corpus, in the data that's being considered by AI. But so again, my point here is, if the resource is one, the West, then it looks like there's nothing else out there, but it is.
This is great. This is how we should have conversations. And I think the digressions, it reminds me of this, where, Deleuze and Guattari speak about the rhizome, right? The ginger, where you have nodes and you have digressions and swan's way. I mean, this is how we have, great conversations, and it opens up so many possibilities. Jeanine, I'm very excited about this conversation with you right now. I also realized something I've noticed being an African scholar in the West. I'm thinking specifically about the problem we're discussing right now is more complex than that. I'm also thinking about how I want to be in this environment by hook or by crook, work from here rather than anywhere else, even if we live in a connected world, simply because of some basic advantages. For instance, we are in the heart of where books get cited. We're in the heart of that system. Even if I was asked, hey, would you like to review a book? It's easier for a publisher to mail it to me to my address within America than to have it sent to Mauritius, where I'm from, because it'll cost more. So it's more advantageous for me to be here. It's more advantageous for me to be here because other people are also in the system of citations, and we're helping each other. We know each other. And it makes it easier for us to have access to being published in the journals, which are, again, primarily Western. They're focused in Europe, they're focused in America. Now, how does this connect to our conversation? We're speaking about different methods. We're talking about different systems, right? Which will never permeate this current system because it has its own hegemony. It is always going to dominate every other system that exists. And our own biases, you and I, being people from a different part of the world, being over here, we're also tapping into the system. And however much we may try to be a little bit different, we're trying to rebel against it, we're trying to do things differently. Our main energy, our main focus is on trying to be a follower of the current system. So we have a lot against us.
Yes, we have so much against us. But when you're fighting a system, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. So it's on us who have the luxury, who are really privileged, honestly, to have access to these resources, to support those who don't. So when we have the opportunities to be able to help, to support others, that's where we are called on. We who understand, we help them. So when we help people we are not limited to helping. Now that we have access to WhatsApp, to all these technology tools, when you talked about helping, being on a committee and supporting a student, yes, they may have to do that, but helping them know where the Wi-Fi would be available, which resource can be free to them to communicate with, maybe the best way, but also many people where we come from tend to work in silos also. They are not used to sharing, and I'm not saying everyone, but generally speaking, I find that people are not sharing resources the way they should, right? So where there is accessibility of Wi-Fi that's free, do people know about that? So just like we share resources here in the West, because we're used to sharing, right? It's the same thing. And I'll give you one example of how we can do it, thinking globally, but also locally. When you get, I'm going to focus on the students, right? We have constantly opportunities for students to collaborate with other students abroad. If you focus on the Mauritius Island, and I focus on Burundi, and we get students from our own respective universities to share the resources, to share ideas, they will cross-feed each other, right? And so the tools that they are using may not be maybe different, but they will cross-fertilize. And so that kind of a correspondence, and I honestly, you may think I'm nuts when I say the bottom line of all of this is relationships. The more relationships we create across borders, across waters, the more we'll be okay, we'll be safe together. But you said something earlier on, we tend to be divided, we tend to be, thinking that way and that way, differently. But it's bringing people together that's going to help us all. And I would say, even if I'm in the US, I'm trying individually, personally, intentionally, because now I know, right? So one last story. The first time I taught in the US, a graduate class was a series of teaching English as a second language. And a graduate student comes to me after class and said, I'm so disappointed in your teaching. I was like, oops, it's my first class, and here we go. And he says, I was hoping you teach the African way. And then I looked at him like a deer in the headlights, that there's such a thing as African way. I literally was in shock. This is about more than 20 years ago. It's an African way. Saba, we've learned one way monolithically. We've been told this is how you teach. We never considered, there was no curriculum already established because we were told it was bad, right? Learning around the fireplace wasn't learning. And yet, well, we learned everything we know up until we got what our little brains got wiped away clean, right? So I had to go back, and that's quickly. I was lucky I had colleagues who created the African Summer Institute. That's when we started revisiting those ways. What was this student expecting? What was he looking for? So obviously he was more aware than I was at that time. And fast forward, that's what I help with my own students today. I try to teach them in the African way, the way you get together and expect. And now, of course, there has, all these other nomenclature names in the in linguistics, communicative language learning, or like cooperative learning, and all of that. It has these cool other names, but traditionally in Africa, you got people around the circle, and you talked, and you prompted, and people give you what they know, and you add a little bit more on what they already know, and you keep sharing. At the end, it's an experience of everyone, not just one standing here and providing information.
Concerning some of the things that you had previously mentioned, one of the challenges that you bring up in the paper is the lingering colonial vestiges in education, such as the brain drain phenomenon that we've discussed prior. And I kind of want to see your perspective on maybe in a more prescient way, because in the paper, it was brought up the potential of new foreign powers having sway in Africa, such as China, but also in a bigger picture, the history of capitalism, the history of colonialism and Christianity, its effects in African countries, especially sub-Saharan countries that you mentioned. I'm wondering, what is it that you interpret now and what you see now and predict for these potential colonial vestiges that are of the future?
No, it is alarming, but also there is hope. Because when these vestiges are there, and we are constantly getting people to be aware that they exist, so you have to uproot them and hopefully bring in the positive elements that help us connect with the global world in a more effective way, rather than in a way that we feel we're less than, right? So when we uproot those elements that are in our curriculum, that are in the way we do things, and I don't even mean, when I say curriculum, I don't mean necessarily day-to-day what a child gets in the classroom, but also the practices outside the classroom, right? So once those are removed, then as we welcome more elements, foreign elements, it doesn't mean we want those who were colonized, those who were oppressed, to just be on their own. No, it's having the power to decide what's good and what's not. Audre Lorde says, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, right? They may allow temporarily to beat him, at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change, right? So how can we, right, accept, welcome elements with confidence, with decision-making, choosing, with having that choice? Because with the colonization, there wasn't room for choice. But now we have a choice. If we can focus on that and drill it and make sure that our young people grow up knowing they are not one under, they are at the table with everybody else making those decisions, that's the way we win. But if they don't come in, if they always present themselves as one under, like I'm weak, I don't have them, right? Then we can't succeed. When we see the even just simple, really simple, and I'll make it quick. Clothes. Why in the world do people who have been oppressed in the global south see the West as the one that has more clothes, better clothes? And when we have beautiful textiles, but still, like you keep looking at this. Again, I could go on and on. I'm sorry, but that's the idea, right? Get in with confidence to negotiate because you have a lot to offer to the world. Like that positionality is going to get us somewhere.
So Jeanine, my question to you is regarding Africa. And here we're talking about the fact that one of the common conversations that comes up whenever we talk about Africa, especially when we're in the West, is that, hey, Africa is way more diverse than we imagine it to be. And that Africa is made up of many countries. And all these countries are different because they have reached different levels of development. They're connected to the rest of the world in different ways as well. So in your paper, in your chapter, you do refer to Africa. And of course, I'm aware that you have a more in-depth and insider knowledge about the different countries within Africa. So since we're speaking today about the importance of integrating all of these indigenous systems together and encouraging dialogue, I would love you to comment further about how you perceive Africa and how different countries are at different levels of this development or this awareness about preserving indigenous knowledge in the context of epistemicide.
Yes, African countries, the 54 African countries, are diverse socioeconomically, socioculturally, sociolinguistically. Yes, it's diverse, and they are at different stages of economic development for sure, and even resources and the size, the number of people, the population, and all is different. But this is where uniting in different spaces helps everyone. It may be a cliche when we say, again, it's the Ubuntu way, right? I exist because you exist. The stronger we are together, who said, it's a proverb, actually, it's a proverb that says, if you want to run fast, run away, run alone. If you want to run far, run together with the other people. So alone, you can run fast, but together, you get far. So that's why I appreciate the union, the organizing inside the continent, so that you have East African community that's organizing themselves with the resources they have, so they can share. Now we can have like a train that goes and that carries the food across goods across so many countries, right? That we didn't have before. You have now, by the way, the African Continental Free Trade Area. That's going. I mean, it's going. There are many countries that have already joined. This is since 2021, so it's recent, right? But if it succeeds, imagine if we didn't have, like in the US, you don't need the passport to go from Texas to California, right? My goodness, imagine if the continent could have that kind of travel where there's more flexibility in travel. How much sharing of resources, all kinds of resources, right? So imagine that. In the West, you have many countries, pedestrians and organizations. So you have these of uniting. There's a uniting that's happening. If they again trusting themselves that they can do it and don't allow any foreigner to divide them again. So united, they can do it. Of course, you have the African Union that's really on the mark, that's moving fast with the strategic plan and all of the strategic goals. I mean, we have so much going on that I'm really optimistic in the way, because united we stop those wars, the senseless killings, the genocides. They will stop it. So back to your point again about how about it's almost like we have the haves and the have-nots, but united. If they put away the differences and just unite, they will achieve so much more. And there is hope, because we see the organizations that are achieving some agreements, and so let's hope that will, they will stay together.
Yeah, my mind goes immediately to what the EU has done. If you study EU law, you learn about the principles, right? The core principles about the freedom of the freedom of movement of workers across Europe. And so if we actually did something like that within Africa, that would really boost the economy and basically ripples of progress across the country.
Absolutely. And remember, those who contributed to the epistemicide are not happy when Africa unites. They would rather see it divided, but then they exploit it more. What Louis asked, about this neo-colonialism. It will happen if we are divided. It will be easy to happen. But if we are united, then it will be harder for them to divide us again.
And I think since you're talking about colonialism, there's one other point that you made in the paper which really marked me. And this is something that is of concern to me too. I remember when I worked in the Vestiges, I noticed, for instance, how there were these China-Africa friendly bridges, or for instance, India had invested in some of the hospitals in Maldives. And this is just one of the many examples of what's happening in that part of the world. So I think in your paper on page 289, when you speak about challenges to the Ubuntu-based model of education in Africa, in point number 5, the last point, is it the last point? Yes, the last one.
Yes, it is.
You speak about, for instance, the China-Africa cooperation, and then you mention, which is important, you say, as long as, of course, China's entry into African education is just is not just more colonization in disguise. So, whenever we speak about, say, the developing world or the East, the countries in the East getting together to become powerful, the problem is always this constant threat of, is it a disguised form of colonization? Maybe not from the West this time, but
another agent. Absolutely.
I mean, on one hand, when I say this, I want to be aware of this dynamic, but at the same time, somewhere in me, the realist, if you want, the person who understands, the principle of realpolitik, as we say, the Bismarck realpolitik.
Yes.
I wonder whether in any kind of combination or merger of any two forces or more, there's always going to be someone who's going to be the driving force, the guide. And very often, this driving source, this hegemonious force is always in control of everything else and is guiding everything else. So how do we tackle this complexity? And of course, I don't think we can answer that question
Right.
What are your thoughts about what you've experienced and witnessed in your experience in Burundi and some of the other parts of Africa that you're familiar with when it comes to this?
No, it is a complex question that whose answer is going to be also complex, and we may not achieve it on our own, even in 2024, 2025, even. It may take, again, this connects to the previous question. It may take countries coming, the global South coming together, especially in African countries, coming together and say, no more wasting our resources to the world out there. Why can we get together and hold on to our resources? So here is where a case like China comes in. I mean, this is business at the core, but the problem is the politics attached to it, right? So it was regular business where I have something, you give me this, I give you this, goodbye, go home. China is not there as China. And again, I'm not from political science studies, but I am observing from my attention to knowledge and how we welcome knowledge from outside and how we value our own knowledge. If we keep holding on to they have better, they know more, then we lose our capacity, our ability to negotiate and position ourselves to succeed. But going to the next door neighbor, like connecting with the next door neighbor, makes us stronger so that the external agent doesn't win, like you just said, doesn't always get more than they are supposed to get. So getting to in a Kirundi, there's a proverb that says, "Ubugirigiri bugira babiri," like where two are united to do something, they gain strength, even if just two. So meaning united, you will see what China is up to. But if you're alone, you don't see it. You're desperate to get resources. You're desperate to get even a little bit. And you just sell your whole country to get these little peanuts, right? So by united again is what's going to help to me. Without that, I don't see how countries that are already under, how they can get themselves out. But what is China in Africa is the same question, like I said. And, I said, and I, we discussed this. We spend hours and hours figuring out how to present this, because that's what maybe Belgium was in Burundi when they came in 1911. It's like with the colonization, that's what I'm hearing. So German, right? So, but are we ready to see what they are coming, what they are bringing to us? Are we going to accept to get hurt again? That's really, are we on that level of understanding those who hurt us and the wounds we haven't even healed from? Can we allow another one to hurt us? Now, a desperate president and his government can say, no, I'm desperate. I need something to help my population. What else can I do? Right? But knock at the door of a neighbor first and see if they have the good for Africa, uniting. So the awareness of unifying the continent is going to be key to help against the colonizers from outside, I think. And that's how I see it. And until they are united, and I can see so much that could happen. If you hear the billions of dollars that go to the West constantly, and we get this little thing, the coffee today in Burundi, those who produce coffee in Burundi cannot drink it. They can't afford it when it comes back processed. So it's really unfortunate. It's sad that a Burundian cannot afford coffee. It's only the rich. The regular Burundian cannot drink coffee because it's too expensive, and yet they grow it. It's just terrible. So how do we do it so that we help each other in Africa? Especially, again, uniting to be stronger and more aware of how the wounds that we carry and how we heal from them, and then really stand head high and claim what's ours and negotiate and do business like people who have the ground, once they can stand for themselves. So
I think the biggest takeaway here is, or the most important takeaway here is about how there must be some sort of ethical grounding in all of these negotiations. And we need to have this give and take, because there's only just been a one-way giving or one-way taking all the while. And I think I am a little hopeful, or very hopeful maybe, just because of being exposed to systems and environments, be they minor, but seeing that there is this, beneficial exchange, even if it is disguised or even if it is obviously pecuniary or commodifying at first, many of these transactions are actually grounded in some kind of ethical exchange. And I think having every transaction added with that.
That's beautiful, Saba. That's really beautiful. Ethical considerations. Without that, I mean, look, people are panicking about, voting next month. Without ethics, we're doomed as a humanity. So you made it beautiful. That's a great way to conclude. And that's why I talked about relationships. Meaningful, ethical relationships. Without that, it's not just Africa, we all fall together. If you can allow me just one point. So Pedro Noguera, he is originally from Puerto Rico, if I'm not mistaken, and he is an education expert in the US. I think he used to be in New York, now I think he's in California. He one time was doing a presentation, I think he had like 1,000 people in the audience, and I was there. And he looked at white people in the audience. He said, "You white people," and he's just not pointing to them. If you don't care about these young people, young, poor English language learners, if you don't care just educating them as humans, how about your own social security? Help them get educated so you can invest in your own social security. So the security of everyone is the security of one. So that's right. So invest, looking at the world as one. So the more secure another country is, the more secure another one is. And so that's really, to me, social security is real, right? In America. And so he said, just make sure they get educated so that they get jobs and they can pay into the social security. And that's for me, again, thank you. Ethical considerations are big deal everywhere. One thing I'm looking at, now that we look at, with my work in human rights and the Africans and Black people, I looked at a native Indian, native Afro-Indian, native Afro-Korean, native Afro-Turkish, and so on. If you ask right now, if you go outside and you meet someone from Turkey and you say, "Hey, do you know if there are native Africans who speak Turkish and, have been there for centuries in Turkey?" They'll say, no, nobody. But you Google, you find them, there are many, but guess what? They are in the margins, pushed in the margins. Every country we check today. Now, of course, the word Africans, there's something about Afro people. We are pushed in the margins. We are the lowest socioeconomically, socioculturally. We don't matter, right? And the world is supposed to continue that way, where the Africans populated Southeast Asia, Central Asia. They were there first, but somehow they were invaded and pushed in the margins. Nobody knows they exist. Indians, Afro-Indians, were there in 7th century. But nobody, if you ask a typical Indian, they will say, no, there are no such, and I've tried, by the way, with my own students, my alums. I said, is there anybody? No Africans, no problem. And then I said, here's a BBC article about them. And they went, oh, what happened? So one of my students created an interactive map showing where they are and what their socioeconomic status is on average in these different countries. It's really beautiful, great project.
It's interesting because I think I had a similar discussion recently about the presence of all of these populations in South America, in Latin America, for instance. And that's also another subject which surprisingly even people from North America are not aware of.
Yes. Yeah. No. Yeah. That's exactly right. So, no, you're doing a fantastic job, by the way. Thank you so much. This is a fantastic idea because you want to draw so much that people are not aware of, and hopefully you can change one person's mind or disposition so they can help one way or another. They can engage in the policy making, policy discussions out there, locally, regionally, internationally, right? So we hope that, again, it's really about people knowing, having the information. You can't help somebody you don't know about, right? Someone has to bring it to your attention to help them. And that's really how I see why I even do the work I do. It's trying to really get people to be aware.
Thank you, Jeanine. Yeah. It's always such a marvel, talking to you. And I hope to continue this discussion. I mean, we still have a lot to talk about, and I think you're a treasure trove of knowledge too, in terms of giving us a more practical insight into what's going on and what we can do. Because I'm not happy with just keeping conversations hanging there at a theoretical level, because that's what we do as academics. But
yes,
having a sort of a practical grounding in that is beautiful. So, Jeanine, thank you, and I hope to continue this conversation maybe in the future on in a different edition of this podcast, and of course off air as well.
All right, of course, yes, absolutely. Always wonderful talking to you.
This was Not to Forgive, but to Understand, with our guest, Jeanine Ntihirageza. To our listeners, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more discussions.